Thank you for inviting me to be part of the Hind College National Seminar on 25th January 2018. It means a lot to me to be here because I was a student of Hind College when I first came to Bombay many years ago. I'm happy to be here today and grateful to the organizers of this conference for giving me this opportunity to present my observations and insights into certain unique aspects of the Sindhi community. In today's talk, I will start with a brief outline of the history of Sindh and how it gradually became a Muslim land with a small Hindu minority. Then, starting from the 18th century, Hindus migrated to Sindh from neighboring provinces and blended together to form a uniquely heterogeneous community. In 1947, as refugees, they displayed their uniqueness in different ways. Finally, a quick glimpse at how the language and culture of Sindh was lost, but certain basic characteristics are retained till today. Sindh, as we know, was home to the Indus Valley civilization, and some people even try to link the people of Mohenjo-daro with today's Sindhis. The fact is that nobody actually knows how Mohenjo-daro disintegrated and what happened to its people. Gradually, Sindh was settled by Indo-European tribes and a Vedic society developed. Over the centuries, there were Persian and Greek influences, and in the 3rd century BC, Emperor Ashoka made Buddhism his state religion, and this influenced Sindh too. A new religion, Islam, came to Sindh in the 8th century, less than 100 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. By the 18th century, Sindh was largely a Muslim province, and the Islam of Sindh had a peaceful and syncretic quality. This Sindhi Islam is well represented by the great poet-philosophers of Sindh like Shah Abdul Latif and others who are loved and revered even today. Even today, many Sindhi Muslims mark Holi and Diwali as festivals that they once participated in. Even today, most Sindhi Muslims consider themselves Sindhis first and Muslims second, as their language, culture and philosophy are more precious to them than their religion. Hindu migration into Sindh probably began at the beginning of the 18th century. It was a time when Sindh was going through a phase of peace and prosperity. Hindus came to Sindh from neighboring provinces for various reasons. Some came to escape religious discrimination, some came fleeing natural disasters, and some came to get away from political unrest which was affecting their livelihood. The Hindus of Sindh brought their lifestyle and belief systems from their places of origin. Some worshipped Shiva, some Vishnu, some the Mother Goddess. Some were followers of Guru Nanak. A small minority, they grouped together and their culture merged. In the process, some of the regressive forms of Hinduism which prevailed in other parts of India were dropped. This painting by Mengraj Talreja, who was born in Shikarpur in 1923, shows a family celebrating Diwali. Looking at them without knowing this, looking at their clothes, their religion is not immediately evident. Like migrants everywhere, the Hindus who made Sindh their home did their best to integrate. Like migrants everywhere, they were hardworking and highly adaptable. And though they continued to be a minority, very soon they were far from powerless. Some of the young men went to work in the courts of the princes of Sindh. They were intelligent, had an aptitude for mathematics since many of them came from a trading background, and they soon educated themselves in Persian, the court language. Once they had proved their reliability and competence, they were able to get similar employment for their brothers, their sons, and other relatives. Their numbers grew. When the British conquered Sindh in the mid-19th century, they were surprised to see how much power Hindus held in the courts. These court officials and their relatives soon took to the British form of education, which gave them employment opportunities in the government service or as professionals. Seeing education as a means to a good life, more and more took to it. Their numbers continued to grow, and by the early 20th century, they had formed a community and called themselves the Amils of Sindh, a proud and aristocratic people who enjoyed lives of comfort and dignity and were committed to the cause of education. When the British entered Sindh, the trading community faced a series of setbacks. The British traders themselves had their own supply chains and trade cartels, so the local traders lost business. The British soon introduced the company rupee, and the money lenders had to go through the losses of currency exchange. However, new opportunities soon arose. They saw that the British loved Sindhi handicrafts. They called these items Sindh work and bought it in large quantities. When they went home on home leave, they packed them into large trunks and took them along. Soon enough, the first Hindu trader had packed a trunk of his own and set sail in one of the British steamships of the time. He got off at the first port and found customers for his ware. Business grew and more Sindhwarkis joined him. Soon, this port was saturated and the adventurous ones went on to the next. From Karachi, they went to Bombay, then Aden, then Cairo, then Gibraltar, then the Canary Islands. And the next destination were the ports of South America, where they reached as early as 1907. To the east, they went to Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and China. By 1947, they were located in ports all around the world. These Sindhwarkis, mostly originating from Hyderabad, brought a huge amount of money into Sindh. Their affluence created an aspirational society just as much as the education of the Amils did. Being a community of migrants, a minority in their land, the Hindus of Sindh developed certain characteristics which are still prevalent and very much recognized even today. Young Sindhis today are probably not aware to what extent the river of Sindh influenced the previous generations. The Indus brought life and a fertile land to an area which, unlike other parts of India, did not receive any monsoon rain. At the same time, the Indus was unpredictable. One year you had the river flowing past your doorstep, and the next year you had to walk 2 miles to see it. Very often the river would flood. Some years your home got washed away and you had to start all over again. Some years it flooded and your entire village could get wiped out. People who lived with this uncertainty year after year naturally became hardy and adaptable. They understood how vulnerable human plans and dreams were. They understood the importance of being on good terms with those around them. And they knew that they had no choice but to adapt to the forces of nature. These were characteristics that came in handy when partition came and the Hindus had to leave Sindh and lost everything they owned and had to start all over again. This is what made them refugees with a difference, goal-oriented, action-oriented, determined to regain their lives of comfort and dignity. We all have heard many times how Sindhis who had nothing bought large sacks of grain and sold it at price lower than the market, and then sold the sack to have something to feed their own families. In her book, Sindhis, A Scattered Treasure, Popti Hiranandani wrote, Sindhis residing in camps would arrange cultural programs, poetry sessions, and religious sermons. In fact, the Sindhis after partition symbolize the acme of achievement that refugees of this type can reach. In Sindh, as we have seen, education was extremely important. The refugee camps were filled with students whose education had been interrupted. There were also many teachers and education officers, highly qualified and competent people without jobs. Before long, an empty room was identified, parents sent their children, and teachers began teaching. At the end of the month, fees were collected and benches were purchased. After 3 months, the teachers began receiving a salary. In another 3 months, the government recognized the school. This is how the Jai Bharat school in Mulund started. I looked up the school online and found that this one room has grown into a school with pre-primary, primary and secondary sections, a junior college and a night degree college, which between them provide education to a large number of students from across the city. This critical period during which Sindhis were focused on getting settled is one that would define the community in the years ahead. They had never been to Harvard Business School, but they did know that the key to business success is to directly address the customer's needs. However, when they became successful using this simple technique, they created resentment. With no state, no political representation, not even a large enough number to form an attractive vote bank, Sindhis today are scattered. Integrated into the communities in which they live, they are detached from links to their own community. Despite the immense contribution in fundamental areas like housing, education, and every other field, they face mockery and prejudice for being money-minded and tasteless.
अरे बाबा तुम बिजनेस करता है या घास काटता है? बैठो बैठो। पहले तो तुमको हमने 12 लाख रुपए एडवांस दिया और 5 लाख रुपए का कपड़ा भी दिया। अभी तुमको और माल चाहिए और पैसा भी?
जी सर।
अरे मैं बिजनेसमैन हूँ, बिजनेसमैन कोई चढ़िया नहीं हूँ, समझा? ये देखा तुमने? ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट देखो, तुम्हारा मरा हुआ ब्रदर इन लॉ ने इस पे साइन किया है। इस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के मुताबिक अगर 15 दिन में तुमने डिलीवरी नहीं दिया तो हम तुमको फुटपाथ पे ला सकता है और तुम्हारा घर और तुम्हारा फैक्ट्री नीलाम कर सकता है।
वो तो है सर।
बड़ी यहाँ क्या बैठा हुआ है? यहाँ क्यों बैठा हुआ है? जाके काम करो और मेरा पैसा वापस दो। उठो उठो, मेरा मुंह क्या देखता है? जा, चल जा।
लेकिन सर 15 दिन में ये काम मैं कैसे पूरा करूंगा?
अरे वो मेरा प्रॉब्लम थोड़ी है, वो तो तेरा प्रॉब्लम है। अब जा यहाँ से, जा। ही तो डाडो सुट्टो थियो झूलेलाल, हाणे ही फैक्ट्री में मुंजी थी वेंदी।
The separation of families following partition and the subsequent loss of joint family connections with future generations led to an incisive break from the past. This break was sealed by the negative stereotypes which most young people tend to shy away from. One of the biggest unsung tragedies of partition is that the Sindhi language and treasures of its literature and knowledge about recent Sindhi history are lost to the present generation. Sindhi heroes are not even remembered, let alone honored. Can you identify any of these great men and women? While Sindhi culture has vanished from young Sindhis without a trace, the essential attributes of their forebears still remain. And though Hindu Sindhis continue to be an increasingly heterogeneous lot, these fundamental attributes, invariably displayed very subtly, are very much in existence even today. Sindhis are scattered worldwide and with no access to their native land, yet they are invariably highly patriotic. They tend to retain that fundamental leaning towards it is the will of God, open to permeating beliefs and rituals from a wide range of sources. While Sindhis are usually very proud of the fact that Sindh had no caste system, the truth is that Sindhis are very often highly conscious of social class. Sindhis are generally not considered to be creative. However, they displayed the utmost creativity in building new lives for themselves after partition. Consider how the most vibrant Indian partition stories made, Tamas and Bunyad, were made by Sindhis, and they are both sagas of the Punjab partition. Even today, many of the Bollywood icons from Karan Johar to Ekta Kapoor have Sindhi blood. Despite all the positive aspects, there's one important fact which stands out, and that is the lack of cohesion within the community. The most obvious example of this is the fact that no Sindhi who became successful in politics has ever been a spokesperson for the community or worked for the specific betterment of the community. I would like to believe that most of them who were from the generation which fought for freedom for India and lost their own homeland were true patriots, true nationalists, and should be admired for this reason. But I've also seen other manifestations of how splintered the community is. Sindhi associations form and invariably splinter into two or more groups which stop associating with each other. Many people have also told me that Sindhis usually don't help each other. I can give you many examples, but a recent and very striking one is the case of Girish Khimani, a playwright and actor who runs a theatre group, The Blind and the Elephant. He contacted me some months ago in connection with a new play he was writing on the theme of life for Sindhis and the Sindhi community in India. Girish is himself from a Sindhi family, and in December 2016 he was in Europe on a scholarship to study theatre. During improvisations in class, when the teacher wanted him to express himself in his mother tongue, he realized he was unable to do so. In an international environment, surrounded by other students whose first language was their mother tongue, he was struck very deeply by the extent of his situation, a handicap shared by almost every single Sindhi of Girish's generation. This shock led to a process of discovery, and one of the milestones on the journey is Girish's new play, In Search of Darya Sagar. When I first met Girish and his co-author Akshat Nigam, I was very impressed with the depth and scale of research and thought they were putting into Sindh and Sindhiness to get an accurate background for their play. When I read their script, I marveled at the skill with which they had presented a story that shows the resilience of the community through its times of trauma, the good and bad ways in which that trauma was handled across the community, and the resultant distortion of culture which the younger generation grew up with. Though I'm not a Sindhi myself, as a writer and researcher on the Sindhi community, I keenly feel the need for a larger body of work about Sindh and Sindhis and a more accurate representation of the community, which I believe will eventually dissolve the present negative stereotypes. I see Girish's play as an important instrument towards this. During the course of my interaction with Girish, I happened to view his first production, Ripples, at a small theatre in Pune. I was impressed to see that this production, entirely paid for through Girish's meagre teaching salary, combined the kind of talent, simple but creative sets, and production values that compares with the best of anything I have seen internationally. In Search of Darya Sagar won the prestigious Hindu Playwright Award in October 2017. This has given Girish visibility and a very big endorsement. He now needs funds. I spent several weeks campaigning among some of the wealthy Sindhis I know and was unable to raise more than a very small amount. In one prominent case, promises were made and broken. Meanwhile, Girish received his first big contribution from a non-Sindhi. Sindhis today, though depleted, are powerful. They contribute greatly to the larger society, yet they tend to be marginalized in the larger society. Being well integrated, they are barely visible. As for the young Sindhis, they may be competent and confident, but they are equally confused and vulnerable in the absence of a comfortable identity or community feeling. As the awareness of heritage and its importance rises in them, something which does appear to be happening, these things will change and a stronger identity is going to emerge. When I wrote my book on Sindh, it was supposed to be a record of my mother's memories of her childhood in Sindh. I wrote it for my family. Ironically, very few members of my own family have made the effort to read the book, but to my great surprise and delight, it continues to be read with new buyers every month from different parts of the world. In the meanwhile, most families who have roots in Sindh continue to eat Sindhi food, though almost always supplemented by local and world cuisines.
मुंहिंजो नालो भारती सदारंगाणी आहे। मां आदिपुर में रहंदी आहियां ऐं मां कविता लिखंदी आहियां, सिंधीअ में बि ऐं हिंदीअ में बि। ऐं अॼु जेका मां कविता तव्हां सभिनी सां वंढणु चाहियां थी या शेयर करणु चाहियां थी, हुनजो उनवान आहे ज़िबान। अंग्रेज़ी पहाके जे बराबरि सिंधी पहाके जी नाकामयाब ॻोल्हा वठी वई हुनखे सिंध तरफ़। अंग्रेज़ी पहाके जे बराबरि सिंधी पहाके जी नाकामयाब ॻोल्हा वठी वई हुनखे सिंध तरफ़। सिंधी कढ़ी, सिंधी साई भाॼी, सिंधी दाल पकवान, सिंधी बेसणी भाॼी, सिंधी कोकी, सिंधी कुने वारा बीह, सिंधी खूंबियूं, वड़ियूं, पापड़, खीचा ऐं खटाण। ज़िबान जा चश्का त यादि आहिनि उनखे, बसि ज़िबान ई विसरी वई अथसि। ज़िबान जा चश्का त यादि आहिनि उनखे, बसि ज़िबान ई विसरी वई अथसि।
Thank you for your attention. I hope you've enjoyed my talk.